Every expert was once a beginner.
I can remember back about 14 years ago when I was Googling how to do certain things, how to build a website, how to, you know, mindset mantras that stuck with me from the very beginning all the way until the present day. Is just like when a child is born, you know, we have our mindsets that stick with us through the rest of our lives. And the wise among us will substitute previous, more inefficient mentalities and mindsets with better pieces of wisdom. So, for example, the big thing when I was coming up was drop out of college, drop out of college. Well, guess what the first thing I did when I made a little bit of money was I went and got my college certification in marketing. So now I could get a job in marketing, but that's one thing that kept me going is I did not have a college education. I did not have an adequate fallback plan or option to easily escape from my dreams. You know, another thing is you know, we build, we grow. The best way to learn is to learn by doing. You know, and every master was once an apprentice. And pretty much, when I built my first, $1 million company, or where my first $1 million came from, so a lot of times the answers are not in plain sight. A lot of times we have to, my first successful company, my first six-figure company was an Amazon store. I tried building Amazon stores for maybe maybe about a month, and it didn't work. And then I revisited Amazon store with a new business model a couple months later, and I started to make six figures a year. So every master was once an apprentice. We adopt new psychologies. The wise will adopt new psychologies as we move forward, and different pieces of wisdom resonate real deep at different levels of success. My thing is I'm all about success. I want to keep becoming more successful. It's a major thing where you will become better usually by doing, and the general voice of wisdom that we have today is like an evolved version of what we had 10 years ago. And the thing that's most important to note is business is really not that complicated. Business is really not that complicated. It really is all about, you learn the basics, and everything is just a Google search away. So if you don't know something, just Google it, and it'll come up, and, work on the finer details as you go along. But if you don't know something, Google it. That's my strategy. That's what I've always been into, is basically, if you don't know something, it's just a Google search away. And I consider myself like a low-level master or a very high-level intermediate in business. But to a beginner, I'm like a fucking genius. So maybe like a very like mid-level master compared to a beginner. But I still learn something new every day. You know, the worst thing you could do is assume that you have to have, 1,000 books. You have to read 1,000 books in order to really master business. It's not that complicated. It really is just as simple as introducing a product into the marketplace, and marketing, and selling it and getting, as many people to come through your door as possible, is basically, Rome wasn't built in a day. I've been doing this for 27 years to achieve like a low level of mastery in business. Funny thing is, well, it's not funny, but me dropping out of college provided exactly what I needed to succeed later on in my life. But the first thing I did when I made money, a little bit of money, was I went back to college and I got certified in marketing. And pretty much to, it's like Bill Gates went back to college after 50 years or 40 years of running Microsoft. And I went back to college. First thing I did when I made money was I went back to college, to leave yourself with like no escape routes. Now that's how you can make the dream happen a lot easier. But I wouldn't recommend dropping out of college, because there's me where I made it in my life, and then there's a lot of people who maybe didn't make it in their life. I'm just trying to become and be as successful as possible. Realize that life is short. One day I'm going to wake up a 60, 70-year-old man. I'd like to live to be like 90, and every day, say my prayers, take my vitamins, and hope for the best. Not like I would not give my life for anyone else's life. There's no one else that I would rather be than me. And me right now, there's no one else that I would rather be. I don't look at anyone else's success and think like, oh man, I sure wish I was that guy. But I'm sure a lot of people look at me and say, oh man, I wish I was that guy. A lot of the people that you worship as like gods of business probably look at me and think like, oh, I wish I had it going on like that fucking guy. It's why like certain pieces of wisdom only speak to certain people at certain times. You could teach me the most advanced level stuff in business, and I would probably it wouldn't make sense for like 20 years. But to an intermediate, to a very high level intermediate in business, intermediate advice resonates real deep. 10 years ago, the people in business were speaking to strictly beginners. We had Tai Lopez, Grant Cardone, people speaking to beginners, and then the beginners become intermediate, so that shit, that intermediate shit that resonates real deep with me. I appreciate you guys like Alex Hormozy, a lot of people doing a lot of shit that helped me out, that learned entrepreneurship in the same generation as me. The 2015 entrepreneurship wave, when Tai Lopez came out with a video of him in his Lamborghini, and 10 years later, it's me here saying, oh, I just I just moved into my new apartment. We're still hustling. We're still making the dream work. I just became a billionaire last week. And generally, my advice is go with the flow. When you go with the flow, go with what makes you the most happy. Because a good measurement of if you're on track is not money, is pleasure or pain. Pleasure and pain, that's what decides if you're doing the right thing. So I'm always moving towards pleasure and moving away from pain. And pretty much, no one's going to do it like I'm going to do it. No one's going to do it like how I'm going to do it. I will be the richest man in the world someday. And part of that is just to piss off haters. Anyone who ever hated on me, anyone who ever miscategorized or disrespected me or left a nasty, dirty little comment on my video, I do this for you. Don't hate me, hate these billions, you little bitch.